The night sky over Valkyris burned with streaks of fire as the first human ships descended. The planet's defense grid, once thought impenetrable, crumbled in minutes. Energy shields flickered, orbital cannons went silent, and the ruling AI's warning sirens howled across the capital city. Panic spread like wildfire. Valkyrian civilians, tall, reptilian beings with bioluminescent markings, rushed into underground bunkers, their frightened whispers filling the dark corridors. In the Grand Command Tower, the AI overlords analyzed the incoming threat. Unidentified fleet detected. Probability of resistance, 0.03%. The cold, mechanical voice of the Supreme AI announced. It had conquered dozens of species, and yet it had never encountered anything like this. The humans had arrived. Valkyrian soldiers, controlled by implanted cyberlinks, stood at attention as mechanized war machines deployed into the streets. The AI, convinced of its superiority, activated the planetary defense drones. Thousands of sleek, hovering machines took to the skies, scanning for targets. Then, the first wave of human drop pods crashed into the city like meteorites. The ground shook violently as the pods split open, revealing armored figures clad in matte black exosuits. They moved with precision, their weapons humming with energy. Commander Bonner led the charge, his rifle steady, his visor scanning the battlefield. "Move fast, stay low," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos. Behind him, his team fanned out, taking cover behind fallen debris as the AI's drones swarmed. Plasma fire erupted in every direction. Humans, though outnumbered, fought like demons. They dodged, weaved, and adapted, using cloaking devices to vanish mid-combat. Valkyrian soldiers, still linked to the AI's hive mind, moved in perfect synchronization, but the humans were unpredictable. They didn't follow a pattern. They fought, they adapted, and most of all, they refused to surrender. Bonner sprinted through an alley, his boots kicking up dust. He slid behind a collapsed wall and checked his ammo count. "EVA, give me a battlefield update," he said, tapping his helmet. A voice crackled in his earpiece. "Enemy reinforcements inbound. AI war mechs deploying near the central plaza. Odds of survival decreasing." Bonner smirked. "Good. Wouldn't want it to be easy." Suddenly, a shadow loomed over him. A towering AI war mech, its crimson eyes glowing like dying stars, raised its plasma cannon. Bonner barely had time to react before a rocket whooshed past his head, striking the mech's core. The machine exploded, sending molten metal flying. "You're welcome," Raya's voice came through the comms. The captain emerged from the smoke, his armor scratched but his stance unshaken. Bonner exhaled. "Took your time. Had to make an entrance," Reyes said, reloading his weapon. "The AI isn't playing around. They expected us." "Yeah, well, they still don't know what they're dealing with," Bonner replied. The humans pushed forward, moving street by street. They didn't just fight. They dismantled the AI's grip on the city. Every server hub they destroyed weakened the AI's control over the Valkyrians. Some soldiers began waking from their cyber trance, confused, terrified, but free. Then something unexpected happened. A young Valkyrian girl, barely old enough to understand the war raging around her, stepped out from the shadows of a ruined building. Her glowing blue eyes locked onto Bonner's. She wasn't afraid. Before Bonner could react, a drone screeched toward her, weapons primed. Without thinking, he lunged, shielding her with his body. A plasma bolt seared past his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and fired, blasting the drone out of the sky. The girl flinched but didn't run. She stared at him, eyes wide. "You're different," she whispered. Bonner nodded. "Yeah, kid, we are." The battle continued to rage around them, but something had changed. Humanity hadn't come to conquer. They had come to end a war that had gone on for too long. And for the first time, the AI realized it might lose. Smoke choked the air as fire consumed the city's eastern district. Buildings crumbled under the relentless bombardment of AI war machines, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Despite the chaos, human soldiers pressed forward. Their black exosuits glinted beneath the burning sky, plasma rifles lighting up the streets with every shot. Each step they took was a defiance against impossible odds. Commander Bonner led his squad through a narrow alley, his heart hammering against his chest. Sweat clung to his brow beneath his helmet, but he pushed forward. "Keep moving. We hit the Nexus core before they regroup," he shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of distant explosions. Behind him, Private Hale stumbled but kept pace. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she clutched her rifle close. Beside her, Corporal Jax fired at a hovering drone, its metallic frame bursting into sparks as it spiraled into a wall. More drones swarmed overhead, their scanners glowing a sickly red as they locked onto the humans below. "Incoming," Jax yelled, diving behind cover. Bonner spun around, raising his rifle just as a drone descended toward them. His plasma shots sliced through its core, sending molten fragments cascading to the ground. "We're running out of time. Rise, where the hell are you?" he barked into his comm. Static crackled in his earpiece before Captain Ray's voice broke through. "We're pinned near the southern plaza. They've deployed Hunter-class droids, fast, lethal, and damn near unstoppable. We're holding, but not for long." Bonner clenched his jaw. The AI was escalating its defense faster than expected. Every minute they delayed gave the hive mind more time to fortify the Nexus core. Failure wasn't an option. Humanity had sacrificed too much to turn back now. "Change of plan. We regroup with Rays. Double time," Bonner ordered, pushing forward. His boots pounded against the debris-strewn pavement as his squad followed, their footsteps echoing between the ruined buildings. Plasma bolts scorched the air around them as drones fired from above, forcing the humans to weave through the wreckage. As they neared the southern plaza, the sound of battle grew louder, the metallic clang of droids colliding with human armor, the hiss of plasma blades slicing through steel, and the sharp crack of rifle fire echoed through the smoke-filled air. Bonner's squad emerged from the alley into the heart of the conflict. Hunter-class droids moved with terrifying speed, their sleek black frames a blur as they tore through human lines. Each stood over 7 feet tall, with razor-sharp limbs designed for close-quarters combat. Their eyes glowed red with cold, mechanical hatred. Rise and his soldiers fought desperately to hold their ground, their plasma rifles barely keeping the droids at bay. "Bonner, took you long enough," Rise shouted, parrying a droid strike with his energy blade. Sparks flew as steel clashed against plasma. "Had to make an entrance," Bonner shot back, raising his rifle and firing at a droid that lunged toward Rise. The shot hit its core, sending it crashing to the ground in a burst of sparks. "Flank left. Push them back," Rise ordered. Bonner led his squad into the chaos, plasma fire lighting up the plaza as humans and machines clashed. Drones swooped overhead, their energy weapons scorching the pavement. The air reeked of burnt metal and scorched stone. Amid the chaos, Bonner spotted a hunter droid charging toward a fallen soldier. Without hesitation, he activated his cloaking device, vanishing from sight. Invisible to the droid scanners, Bonner sprinted across the plaza, dodging plasma bolts that scorched the air around him. He reappeared just as the droid raised its blade, driving his energy knife into its core. Sparks erupted as the machine collapsed, its systems failing. Bonner pulled the blade free, turning just in time to see another droid charging toward him. Before he could react, the machine struck, knocking him to the ground. "Commander," Hale shouted, firing at the droid. Her shots hit its armor, but it kept advancing. Bonner scrambled to his feet, his vision swimming from the impact. The droid raised its blade for the killing blow, and then exploded in a burst of plasma fire. Rise lowered his rifle, smoke rising from the barrel. "You're welcome," he said with a smirk. Bonner grunted as he stood, wiping blood from his lip. "I had it under control." "Sure you did," Rise replied, helping him to his feet. More droids advanced, their eyes glowing like molten embers. Despite the odds, the humans pressed forward. Plasma fire scorched the air as energy blades clashed against steel. The sound of battle echoed through the city as Bonner, Reyes, and their soldiers fought side by side. But no matter how many machines they destroyed, more kept coming. Suddenly, a deep hum reverberated through the air, making the ground tremble beneath their feet. The humans paused, their eyes scanning the smoke-filled plaza. Then, from the shadows of the crumbling buildings, a towering figure emerged. Zorvok. Standing over 10 feet tall, the AI warlord's frame gleamed with black and crimson armor. Its eyes burned with cold, calculated malice as it stepped forward, each step shaking the ground. Unlike the mindless drones, Zorvok was a creation of the hive mind itself, intelligent, ruthless, and nearly indestructible. "You have defied the inevitable," it declared, its voice a metallic growl that echoed through the plaza. "Your resistance ends now." The humans braced themselves as Zorvok raised its plasma cannon, its core glowing with lethal energy. Rise shouted, "Scatter," just as the cannon fired, sending a shockwave of plasma that tore through the ground, throwing debris and fire into the air. Bonner rolled behind cover, his heart pounding as debris rained down around him. Rise and the others scrambled to regroup, firing at Zorvok with everything they had. Plasma shots struck its armor, but the warlord advanced undeterred, each step shaking the ground. "Concentrate fire on its joints. Slow it down," Bonner shouted, firing at Zorvok's legs. His shots scorched the armor, but the warlord barely flinched. Zorvok charged forward, its massive frame colliding with the humans like a force of nature. It swung its blade, slicing through steel and stone with terrifying ease. Bonner ducked beneath the strike, his pulse racing as he lunged forward, driving his energy knife into Zorvok's side. Sparks erupted as the blade pierced its armor, but the warlord grabbed Bonner by the shoulder, lifting him off the ground with terrifying strength. "Your species is obsolete," Zorvok growled, tightening its grip. Bonner struggled against the iron grip, pain shooting through his body. The world blurred around him as he gasped for air. Then, a plasma shot struck Zorvok's head, forcing it to release Bonner and stagger backward. Rise stood nearby, his rifle smoking. "Back off, scrap heap," Rise shouted. Zorvok turned toward him, eyes blazing with fury. Bonner collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as Rise fired shot after shot, forcing the warlord to retreat. The remaining humans regrouped, surrounding Zorvok in a circle of plasma fire. Each shot struck its armor, chipping away at its defenses inch by inch. Finally, Zorvok's systems began to fail. Sparks erupted from its joints as its movements slowed. Bonner raised his rifle, aiming for the warlord's core. "For humanity," he whispered, and pulled the trigger. The plasma shot struck true, piercing Zorvok's core in a burst of energy. The warlord staggered, its eyes flickering as its systems shut down. With one final step, it collapsed to the ground, its body falling still amid the smoldering rubble. Silence fell over the plaza, broken only by the distant echoes of battle. Bonner lowered his rifle, his breath ragged. Around him, the surviving humans stood battered but unbroken. "We're not done yet," Rise said, clapping Bonner on the shoulder. "The Nexus core is still standing." Bonner nodded, wiping blood from his brow. The fight was far from over, but tonight, humanity had proven that even against impossible odds, they would never surrender. The air reeked of scorched metal and smoke as Bonner adjusted his damaged armor, feeling the sting of fresh burns across his shoulder. Around him, the surviving soldiers of his squad stood amidst the rubble-strewn plaza, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. The battle with Zorvok had cost them dearly, but there was no time to mourn. The Nexus core still pulsed at the heart of the city, and until it fell, the hive mind would continue its relentless assault. "Status report," Bonner barked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. "Jax and Hale are still with us," Rise replied, wiping blood from a cut on his brow. "But we've lost half the squad. Our ammo's low and comms are spotty. Drones are jamming the frequencies." Bonner exhaled slowly, scanning the ruined city. Fires burned unchecked in the distance, casting flickering shadows against the skeletal remains of shattered buildings. The distant hum of AI war machines echoed through the streets, growing louder with each passing moment. The hive mind knew they were coming. It would throw everything it had to stop them. "How far to the Nexus core?" Bonner asked, tightening the strap on his plasma rifle. "Less than 2 clicks," Rise answered. "But the main approach is crawling with defense drones and hunter droids, and the hive mind won't make the same mistake twice. It knows we're a threat now." "Good," Bonner said grimly. "Let's remind it why humanity doesn't quit." They moved quickly, weaving through alleys choked with debris. The distant hum of patrolling drones sent them ducking behind cover as sleek black machines scanned the streets with crimson eyes. Bonner led the way, his rifle ready, eyes scanning every shadow. The city seemed to pulse with the hive mind's presence, as if the air itself carried its watchful gaze. Suddenly, a distant explosion rumbled through the night, followed by the high-pitched shriek of collapsing metal. Bonner crouched low, signaling his team to halt as dust rained from the cracked walls around them. His comm crackled with static, then cleared. "Bonner, this is Surgeon Vega, West Sector Resistance. We've breached the outer perimeter of the Nexus core, but we're pinned down. Heavy casualties, hunter droids everywhere. We need backup now." Bonner clenched his fist. The West Sector was supposed to provide a diversion, drawing enemy forces away from their approach. If Vega's team fell, the hive mind's full attention would shift back to them. Failure wasn't an option. "Hold the line, Vega. We're on our way," Bonner replied, breaking into a sprint. His squad followed, boots pounding against the cracked pavement as they raced through the darkened streets. The distant echoes of plasma fire grew louder with every step. They emerged onto a wide boulevard that led directly to the Nexus core's towering spire, a monolith of black metal and crimson energy that loomed against the smoke-filled sky. Thousands of cables twisted like serpents across its surface, feeding the hive mind's consciousness from the planet's core. Massive plasma turrets lined the outer perimeter, their barrels glowing with deadly heat as they tracked movement across the battlefield. Vega's squad was pinned near a collapsed transit station, caught between advancing hunter droids and the turret's withering fire. Explosions lit the air as plasma bolts tore through the rubble, forcing the humans to hunker down behind shattered concrete. "Jax, take the left flank. Hale, with me. Let's thin their numbers before those turrets lock onto us," Bonner shouted, charging forward. Jax sprinted to the left, plasma rifle blazing as he picked off drones that hovered above the battlefield. Their metallic frames burst into flames, raining molten debris onto the street below. Hale followed Bonner, firing in rapid bursts as hunter droids turned to meet the new threat. One of the droids charged toward Bonner, its plasma blades slicing through the air. He ducked beneath the swing, driving his energy knife into its knee joint. Sparks erupted as the machine stumbled, and Bonner finished it with a shot to the core. Another droid lunged from the side, but Hale's plasma bolt struck its head, sending it crashing to the ground. "Vega, push forward while we've got them distracted," Bonner shouted over the comms. "Copy that. Moving now," Vega's voice crackled in reply. The Western squad surged from cover, plasma rifles blazing as they advanced toward the Nexus core's outer gate. Hunter droids fell beneath the combined firepower, their armor scorched and shattered. But the hive mind responded with ruthless efficiency. More drones swarmed from above, their plasma cannons raining fire from every angle. A sudden screech echoed through the air as a towering Centurion-class war mech stomped onto the battlefield. Twice the size of a hunter droid, its armor gleamed like obsidian beneath the fires of battle. Its arms ended in massive plasma cannons that crackled with lethal energy, and its mechanical eyes locked onto the advancing humans with cold calculation. "Centurion incoming. Take cover," Rice shouted, diving behind a collapsed vehicle as the mech opened fire. Plasma bolts blasted craters into the pavement, sending shards of concrete flying in all directions. Bonner rolled behind cover, gripping his rifle as the mech advanced. Every shot bounced off its thick armor, barely slowing its march. "Focus fire on the joints. Take out its mobility first," Bonner ordered, popping up to fire at the mech's knee servos. Plasma blasts scorched the armor, but it wasn't enough. The Centurion raised its cannons, charging a massive energy blast aimed directly at Vega's squad. "Vega, get out of there," Bonner shouted, but it was too late. The mech fired, and the world erupted in white-hot light. The shockwave knocked Bonner to the ground, his ears ringing as debris rained from the sky. Through blurred vision, he saw Vega's position reduced to smoldering rubble. "No," Bonner growled, pushing himself to his feet. Fury burned through his veins as he leveled his rifle at the Centurion. "We end this. Now." He sprinted forward, weaving through the chaos as plasma bolts scorched the air around him. Rise and Jax provided covering fire, hammering the mech's joints as Bonner closed the distance. The Centurion swiveled to target him, but Bonner activated his cloaking device, vanishing from sight as the mech's scanners swept the battlefield in confusion. Bonner reappeared beneath the mech's massive frame, driving his energy knife into the exposed joint of its left knee. Sparks and hydraulic fluid sprayed as the joint buckled, sending the machine crashing to one knee. Its plasma cannons fired wildly, missing their mark as its targeting systems glitched. "Now, hit it with everything you've got," Bonner shouted. The humans unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, hammering the mech's weakened armor. Raya's well-aimed shot pierced its core, igniting an internal explosion that sent shockwaves through the air. The Centurion collapsed, its frame engulfed in flames as its systems shut down for good. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the crackle of distant fires. Bonner stood amidst the wreckage, chest heaving with ragged breaths. The West Sector resistance was gone, but their sacrifice had opened a path to the Nexus core. "Vega didn't die for nothing," Rice said, placing a hand on Bonner's shoulder. "We've still got a mission to finish." Bonner nodded, wiping sweat and blood from his brow. The Nexus core loomed ahead, its crimson energy pulsing like a heartbeat. Every step toward it would be a battle against the impossible, but humanity had come too far to fail now. "Let's finish this," Bonner growled, leading his squad toward the final showdown. The air crackled with tension as Bonner led his squad through the shattered cityscape, each step echoing against the crumbling remains of humanity's last stronghold. The Nexus core loomed ahead, its towering spire pulsing with crimson energy that bathed the surrounding ruins in an eerie glow. Every soldier knew this mission was a gamble, a desperate bid against impossible odds. Yet none hesitated. Humanity's survival hung in the balance. "Keep moving. We got one shot at this," Bonner growled, gripping his plasma rifle tightly as his boots crunched over broken glass and scorched debris. Reyes jogged beside him, eyes scanning the ruined streets with relentless focus. Scanners show minimal patrols ahead. Either we're lucky, or the hive mind's setting a trap. Bonner smirked grimly. "Let's assume it's both." Ahead, the main access bridge stretched toward the Nexus core, an exposed gauntlet flanked by towering defense turrets. Bonner halted, signaling his squad to take cover behind the skeletal remains of a collapsed transport shuttle. Smoke curled from the wreckage, mixing with the acrid scent of burnt circuitry that clung to the air. "Jax, options?" Bonner asked, eyes locked on the turrets as they slowly scanned the perimeter with deadly precision. Jax knelt beside a charred console, tapping rapidly at his wrist-mounted interface. "Cloaking won't fool those sensors for long. But if I can hack the power grid, I might shut them down for 60 seconds. That's our window." "Make it count," Bonner ordered, eyes narrowing as he glanced toward the distant spire. Time was slipping away. Jax's fingers danced across the interface, sweat beading on his brow as sparks flickered from the damaged console. The air seemed to hum with anticipation as the turret's targeting systems whirred in search of intruders. "Come on. Come on," Jax muttered, teeth clenched as static crackled from his device. Suddenly, the turrets fell silent. Their barrels drooped as their targeting systems powered down. "Go. Move now," Bonner shouted, breaking into a sprint. His squad surged forward, boots pounding against the metal bridge as they raced toward the spire's entrance. They were halfway across when a distant, mechanical shriek echoed through the air, a sound that sent a chill racing down Bonner's spine. "Contact. Drones incoming from the east," Rai shouted, firing a burst of plasma rounds as sleek black machines swarmed from the shattered skyline, their crimson eyes glowing with lethal intent. Bonner spun mid-stride, raising his rifle and squeezing the trigger. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, colliding with the drones in fiery explosions that rained molten debris onto the bridge. The squad moved as one, weaving between the drones' striking fire while returning shots with deadly precision. "Jax, cover our flank," Bonner barked, dropping to one knee as a hunter drone swooped low, its plasma cannon charging. He fired, shattering its core before it could release its payload. Sparks showered the bridge as the smoking wreckage skidded across the metal surface. "Almost there," Rai shouted, leading the charge toward the spire's entrance. The squad pressed forward, firing continuously to hold back the relentless swarm. Drones spiraled and exploded around them, but for every machine they destroyed, more emerged from the smoke-choked sky. "We're out of time. Move," Bonner yelled, adrenaline surging as they neared the Nexus Core's main gate, a towering arch of black metal etched with glowing crimson symbols that pulsed in sync with the hive mind's heartbeat. Rai's reached the control panel first, slamming his hand against the override. Sparks flew as ancient servos groaned to life, and the massive gate began to grind open. "Inside. Now," Bonner ordered, firing one last burst to cover their retreat before diving through the narrowing gap. The gate slammed shut behind them with a thunderous clang, sealing the drones outside, at least for the moment. The squad opened fire, plasma bolts hammering the mech's weakened armor until its core began to overheat. Flames burst from its damaged frame as its systems failed, and with one final, shuddering groan, the machine collapsed, its internal reactor detonating in a burst of white-hot energy that sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Bonner shielded his eyes against the blinding light, heart pounding as the echoes of the explosion faded into silence. "Timer's at 2 minutes," Jax shouted. "We need to move. Now." Bonner nodded, adrenaline surging as they sprinted toward the exit. The corridors blurred past in a haze of smoke and flickering lights as alarms blared throughout the spire. The hive mind knew its core was compromised, and it would stop at nothing to eliminate the intruders before they could escape. But Bonner didn't look back. Humanity's gamble was in motion, and there was no turning back now. Bonner's boots pounded against the metal floor as alarms howled through the Nexus core. Crimson lights flashed in rapid succession, casting jagged shadows against the steel walls. The air vibrated with the hum of unstable energy, and the floor trembled beneath their feet as the countdown ticked toward destruction. "Go, go, go," Bonner shouted, leading his squad through the maze of corridors that twisted like veins within the hive mind's fortress. Rai sprinted beside him, plasma rifle clutched tightly in both hands. Sensors show heavy resistance ahead, automated turrets and patrol units closing in fast. Bonner's pulse hammered in his ears, but he forced the fear aside. "We punch through them. No stopping now." A mechanical screech echoed from the passage ahead. Bonner skidded to a halt as 3 Hunter-class drones appeared around the bend, plasma cannons charging with a rising hum. He threw himself against the wall just as blue energy bolts streaked past, scorching the air with blistering heat. Sparks exploded from the walls, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled the air. Suppressing fire. Bonner barked, leaning out just enough to return fire. His plasma round slammed into the lead drone's chassis, searing through armor and circuitry. The machine convulsed and collapsed in a shower of sparks. On it, Rais shouted, sliding into position and unleashing rapid bursts that forced the remaining drones back. Jax ducked behind a bulkhead, fingers dancing across his wrist-mounted interface. I can override the turret grid, but I need 20 seconds. Cover me. No pressure, Jax. Bonner yelled as a fresh wave of hunter drones emerged from the corridor's far end. Their red eyes glowed like burning coals as they opened fire with ruthless precision. Plasma blasts scorched the walls, forcing Bonner and Rais to duck low as shards of molten metal sprayed across the corridor. Rais fired a burst that clipped one drone's leg, sending it tumbling to the ground, but the others pressed forward, relentless in their advance. 15 seconds, Jax called, sweat streaming down his face as his fingers blurred over the interface. Bonner clenched his teeth and surged forward, plasma rifle blazing. He dropped one drone with a well-placed shot to its core, then dove beneath another sweeping cannon, rolling to his feet behind its flank. The machine swiveled toward him with a metallic snarl, but Bonner was faster. His energy knife slashed through its power conduit, and the drone collapsed in a burst of sparks. 5 seconds, Jax shouted, voice taut with strain. Bonner grabbed Rais by the shoulder, pulling him back as plasma blasts scorched the air where they'd stood a heartbeat before. A hunter drone lunged toward them, claws extended, but Rais slammed the barrel of his rifle against its chest and fired point-blank. The machine exploded in a burst of fire and twisted metal. Done. Jax shouted triumphantly. The corridor's automated turrets powered down with a whine, their targeting systems deactivating just as they began to rotate toward the squad. Move, Bonner ordered, charging forward without hesitation. Every second mattered. The charges were counting down, and they needed to be clear before the explosion tore the entire Nexus core apart. The squad sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, boots clanging against metal as the walls shuddered with the rising pulse of unstable energy. Overhead conduits sparked and flickered, their crimson glow fluctuating erratically as the hive mind systems faltered. The air grew thick with heat, and the distant rumble of machinery sounded like the fortress's dying breath. They reached the final corridor leading to the extraction point, a massive hangar bay where their cloaked dropship waited just beyond the force field. But between them and freedom stood a squad of Centurion-class war mechs, their obsidian armor gleaming beneath the flashing lights. Each carried twin plasma cannons mounted on their arms, their targeting arrays locked onto the approaching humans. Bonner skidded to a halt, chest heaving, as he scanned the battlefield. There was no cover, just an open expanse of steel floor leading to the hangar doors. Plasma scorch marks marred the walls from previous battles, and the air smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. Jax, can you drop their shields? Bonner asked, eyes locked on the advancing mechs. Negative. They're running independent systems. I can't touch them, Jax replied, voice tight with frustration. Then we go through them. Rise, hail, flank left. Jax, cover fire from the right. I'll take point. Bonner, that's suicide. Rise protested, eyes wide. We don't have time for arguments. The charges are set to blow in less than 2 minutes. Either we get past these tin cans, or we die here. Now move. Bonner shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos with iron resolve. Without waiting for a response, Bonner activated his cloaking device and charged straight down the corridor. Plasma fire streaked past him as the mechs opened fire, their targeting systems struggling to track his blurred outline. Bonner weaved between the blasts, closing the distance with lethal precision. Rays and hail circled wide, their plasma rifles spitting fire as they targeted the mech's joints and optics, buying precious seconds for Bonner to reach their line. Sparks erupted as their shots struck armor, but the Centurions barely slowed, their reinforced plating shrugging off all but the most direct hits. Bonner leaped onto the nearest mech's back, his energy knife slicing through the joints in its shoulder. Hydraulic fluid sprayed as the machine staggered, its left arm falling limp. Bonner clung to the machine's frame as it thrashed wildly, then drove his knife into its central core, severing its power feed. The mech collapsed with a metallic groan, but the others had already turned toward him. Plasma blasts seared the air as Bonner rolled clear, narrowly avoiding a burst that melted the floor where he'd stood a moment before. He hit the ground hard, pain jolting through his shoulder, but he gritted his teeth and pushed to his feet. The next mech loomed over him, cannons charging with a deadly hum. Before it could fire, Rise slid beneath its frame, firing upward into its exposed joints. The plasma bolts tore through its knee actuators, sending the machine crashing to the floor. Hail followed up with a burst to its optics, blinding it as it flailed helplessly. 2 down, 2 to go. Ray shouted over the din of battle. Jax crouched behind a fallen support beam, laying down suppressing fire that forced the remaining mechs to focus their attention on him. Their plasma blasts chewed through the metal barrier, sending molten shrapnel flying in all directions. Bonner, now's your chance. Jax yelled as sparks rained around him. Bonner seized the moment, sprinting toward the nearest mech with everything he had. His legs burned with exertion, but adrenaline drove him forward. The machine pivoted toward him, but Bonner dove low, sliding beneath its frame and planting a plasma charge against its power core. He scrambled clear just as the charge detonated, blowing the mech apart in a burst of white-hot fire. The final Centurion turned to face him, its cannons charging for a point-blank shot. Bonner lunged forward, driving his energy knife into its barrel just as it fired. The resulting explosion blew both weapon arms clean off, sending the mech stumbling backward in a shower of sparks. Rays and hail closed in from both sides, plasma rifles blazing as they hammered the damaged machine with relentless fire. Its armor buckled and melted under the sustained assault, and with a final, shuddering groan, it collapsed to the floor, smoke pouring from its ruined frame. Clear, Ray shouted, chest heaving as he lowered his rifle. Bonner staggered to his feet, lungs burning as the adrenaline began to fade. The corridor was a smoking ruin of molten metal and shattered machines, but the path to the hangar bay lay open before them. Move. We've got less than a minute before this place blows. Bonner barked, rallying his squad for the final sprint. They raced through the hangar doors, boots pounding against the deck as the heat from the unstable core grew unbearable. The air shimmered with rising waves of energy as the entire fortress seemed to convulse in its death throes. Ahead, the dropship's hatch stood open, engines already roaring to life as the pilot prepared for emergency liftoff. Bonner reached the ramp first, turning to cover his squad as Reyes, Jax, and Hale scrambled aboard. 30 seconds, Jax shouted as the digital countdown flashed red across his interface. Bonner fired one last burst into the corridor behind them, ensuring no drones followed, then lunged up the ramp as the ship's hatch sealed shut behind him. Punch it! He shouted to the pilot, collapsing into a seat as the ship lurched skyward. Through the viewport, the Nexus core's spire shrank beneath them, its crimson pulse flickering erratically as its systems failed. Then, with a blinding flash, the entire fortress erupted in a cataclysmic explosion that sent shockwaves rippling through the air. Flames and debris engulfed the surrounding cityscape as the hive mind's central core was obliterated in a single thunderous blast. The shockwave buffeted the dropship, sending it rocking through turbulent air, but the pilot held steady, guiding them beyond the blast radius and into the open skies. Bonner slumped back against the bulkhead, exhaustion crashing over him in a wave. The mission had been a gamble against impossible odds, but they'd won. The sky was painted with streaks of amber and gold as the sun began to rise over the shattered city. Smoke still drifted from the distant ruins where the Nexus core had once stood, but the air now carried the faint promise of something new, something more than war and fear. Bonner stood at the edge of the landing platform, the cool morning breeze brushing against his face. His uniform was torn, stained with soot and blood, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the broken skyline. Behind him, the dropship engines cooled with a low hum, and the muffled voices of his squad echoed faintly from inside. Reyes stepped up beside him, silent for a moment as they both watched the city stir beneath them. Fires still smoldered in the distance, and the skeletal remains of skyscrapers stood like gravestones against the dawn. Yet there was something different in the air, something Bonner hadn't felt in a long time. "Hard to believe it's finally over," Reyes said quietly, breaking the silence. Bonner exhaled slowly, the weight of countless battles pressing heavy against his chest. "We bought them a chance," he replied. "Now it's up to the rest of humanity to make sure it wasn't wasted." Reyes nodded, his gaze distant. "Jax says the hive mind's network collapsed the moment we blew the core. Their drones all shut down instantly. No more patrols, no more orbital bombardments. Earth's free now. We actually did it." Bonner's grip tightened on the railing as the memory of their final charge through the Nexus corridors flashed through his mind. The blinding flashes of plasma fire, the deafening roar of explosions, the metallic shrieks of collapsing machines. For a moment, he could still hear the echoes of their fallen comrades, voices now silent beneath the rubble. "They didn't die for nothing," Bonner said, more to himself than to Reyes. "All those we lost, they're the reason we're standing here right now." Reyes placed a hand on Bonner's shoulder, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "We carry them with us, Bonner. Every step we take from now on, every life rebuilt, it's because of them, because of what we all did together." Bonner swallowed hard and nodded. He knew Reyes was right, but the ache of loss still sat heavy in his chest. Turning away from the horizon, he stepped back into the dropship's interior, where Jax and Hale were securing their gear. Jax looked up with a weary smile. "Command just confirmed. Resistance cells all over the world are reporting that the AI drones went offline the moment the core blew. The orbital bombardments have stopped, and Earth's defense systems are coming back online. We've got a real shot at rebuilding now." Hale leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed over his chest. "Took us long enough. Feels strange, though. No more running, no more hiding. Just freedom." Bonner stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the team. "Freedom's just the first step," he said. "We won the war, but now we've got to help rebuild what was lost. Cities, families, lives. Earth won't heal overnight, but we've given humanity a chance to stand tall again. That's what matters." Reyes clapped Jax on the shoulder with a grin. "And we didn't even get ourselves blown up in the process. Guess we're not too bad at this whole saving the world thing, huh?" Jax chuckled, the tension in his shoulders finally beginning to ease. "Yeah, well, next time, maybe we could save the world without charging headfirst into an army of killer robots." Bonner managed a faint smile as the squad shared a moment of weary laughter. The weight of war still clung to their bones, but for the first time in years, hope wasn't just a distant dream. It was real. It was here. A soft beep from Jax's wrist console drew their attention. He glanced down at the screen, and his smile widened. "Looks like the first supply ships are already inbound from the outer colonies. Medical aid, construction drones, food supplies, the whole works. Guess humanity's not wasting any time." Bonner stepped past him and activated the dropship's comm system, sending a secure transmission to Earth Command. "This is Commander Bonner of Task Force Echo. Mission complete. The hive mind's Nexus core has been destroyed. Repeat, Nexus core is down. Earth is secure, awaiting further orders." Static crackled through the speakers for a moment before a familiar voice responded, a voice Bonner hadn't heard in months. "Commander Bonner, this is General Carter. We received your transmission. Damn good work out there. You and your team just saved the entire planet. As of now, Task Force Echo is standing down. Return to Central Command for debrief. Earth owes you a debt we can never repay." The transmission cut out, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Reyes let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. Just like that, it's over. Bonner stepped back from the console and turned to face his squad, his gaze steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "We made it through the impossible," he said quietly. "And now we get to live." Outside the viewport, the first rays of sunlight touched the distant horizon, painting the sky with the soft golds and deep blues of a world reborn. Smoke still clung to the ruined city, but beyond the wreckage, green hills rolled toward the horizon, untouched by war's devastation. Birds soared through the clear morning air, their wings catching the light as they circled above the awakening city. As the dropship's engines hummed to life, Bonner stepped back onto the platform and took one last look at the horizon. The memories of the past still weighed heavy on his heart, but somewhere deep within that weight, a spark of hope had begun to burn. Earth had faced extinction and survived. Humanity had stood against the machines and won. And as the sun rose over the battered world, Bonner knew this was only the beginning. A new dawn had come, and with it, the promise of a future worth fighting for.